Welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today is May 25th, 2011. My name is Jason Lettieri and I'm here with Anthony Nicolaitis, and today's topic that we're going to be covering is the Webserver with Unitronics Enhanced Series Controllers. So we'll start off with a PowerPoint. We'll be looking at some of the uses, the two different flavors of Webserver that we have, some of the requirements, and then we'll also go over a demo. We'll show you a couple examples of the Webserver, and we'll build an example in VisiLogic as well. So what is a Webserver? A Webserver allows you to view and operate your system from anywhere that you have internet access, whether it's an internet cafe, your home computer, your office, your BlackBerry smartphone. Essentially anywhere where you have an internet connection, you will be able to dial in and view the different statuses of the operands, make changes, assign new values, reset bits, things of that nature. It's supported by all popular web browsers, so again that means you do not need any Unitronics software to be able to actually view the statuses of the PLC. You're not going to be able to view the actual HMI screen like you would remote operate or remote access with the web server, but you do still have access to all and any of the operands within the system. So you can set different values, you can set bits, integers, whatever you like really. We'll look at how you can go about doing that. So it's easy to program with VisiLogic. There's no HTML knowledge, no coding required for that really. If you're using the simple web server. We do have an advanced web server as well, which, as the screen shows here, is over the SD card, and with that you can design your own HTML custom pages. So we'll look at how to do that. Now I mentioned there was two different types of flavors. We have an advanced versus a simple web server. They both allow you to monitor and edit operands, and you can view them from any standard web browser, Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer. Specifically with the advanced web server, we go ahead and we give you a zip file, which I'll show you how to access, but within the zip file it gives you everything that you need. There's a project template which you must start with if you want to use the advanced web server. The template file that we have, it has a bunch of locked subroutines, and within those subroutines is the code, which is Unitronics proprietary information, but it allows the web server to function over the SD card, and within that zip file all the information you need is there to get started with it. The template file, there's an extremely well written PDF file that walks you through the different steps for linking operands, and we'll go into that in more detail later. But along the lines of the advanced web server, there's fully customizable HTML pages. You can also have password protection. So if the user dials in the IP address for your website that's being hosted off of the controller, first thing they'll need to do is enter in a username and a password before they can actually view the website or make any changes and so on. You can also link external videos and pictures, so the files don't have to be hosted directly on the PLC itself. You can have external links to, say, YouTube, embed their code. You can have pictures linked off different sites. There's the ability to do that with the advanced web server. And also a pretty neat feature is that you can download files from the SD card. So what that means is if you are, say, logging information in a CSV Excel file on the PLC, you can have the users be able to dial in and download that Excel file that's being created off of the SD card, download it through the web server, and have access to it right on your PC, be able to download it from the web server. So those are kind of some of the unique features that you can do with the advanced. And you'll notice for the blurb on the simple web server, it's easily able to be designed from VisiLogic. That's the main feature of the simple web server, that there's not a whole lot to set up for it. We'll look at how you do it, but it's, as it mentions, it's pretty simple to set up. There's no HTML experience required if you are using the simple web server. So we'll look at real quick too some of the requirements. For either web server really, you need to be using an enhanced series controller. So that means a Vision 130, 350, 570, 560, 1040, or an upcoming 1210 as well. So you essentially just need to be using an enhanced series controller for either the simple or the advanced. The advanced will also use the SD card, but as long as you're using an enhanced series controller within VisiLogic, you'll notice that there's the option to define the simple web server. And along with an enhanced series controller, you do also need to have an Ethernet card installed. Without the Ethernet card, you won't be able to get online and have access to a network. So that's also a necessity, is that you have an Ethernet card installed on the PLC enhanced controller that you want to be able to use the advanced web server with. So specifically for the advanced web server, which is what these requirements are outlining in the slide, as I mentioned, you'll need to use the template application that's included in the zip file. You'll also need an SD card. The SD card will need to be formatted with the SD tools utility. We went over this in an earlier webinar that we have available online now as well if you want to review the basics of the SD card. But essentially you need to have the card formatted with our Unitronics SD card tools, which will assign it a Unitronics file folder structure. And you simply need to place your web files inside the folder that's labeled web. That's where you place your HTML files, the custom files that you've created, and the files that you want to be available on the web server. Now, I mentioned you can have your own custom web pages. Here we say you can use an editor such as Microsoft Front Page. This is just one example. You can really use whatever HTML authoring software that you want. Microsoft Front Page is just one of the more commons, but again, any HTML editor, straight line coder you can use without a problem. The website that we support are following the AJAX format for coding, so you can have Java and any other custom HTML, JavaScript, any other HTML code on there. So it's following the AJAX format, JavaScript, HTML code, anything that you want to have on there really. So as well here, if the PLC is accessible via internet, PLC must be connected and have a fixed IP address. So we'll look at that a little bit more. The PLC will have a local IP address assigned to it, as we went over in our Ethernet webinar. And if you want the PLC to be accessible to the outside world, which is what most people want to do, if you just use the static IP address that you assign in VisiLogic, you'll be able to view it on your local intranet. So any PC that's connected to your office will be able to access just by dialing in the IP address that you specify in VisiLogic. However, more commonly, you'll want the outside world to be able to access the PLC. So what you need to do then is have what's called port forwarding set up. And to do that specifically, you'll need to talk to an IT administrator for your network, your corporate IT person. If you mention to them that you need port forwarding from the PLC to an outside external IP address, they'll be able to help you with that. It's not something that we can explain specifically to you because it is different for all different corporate networks. Everything is set up differently on the internet cloud for your specific corporate network. However, as I mentioned, any IT person, if you mention that you need port forwarding, they will be able to set that up for you. And once they set up port forwarding, essentially what it's doing is someone will punch in an IP address for your corporate network, and that will go through the routers and it'll do the port forwarding and assign it back to the local PLC address. So it's taking the outside address, port forwarding it, and bringing it into the local IP address, therefore giving you access to the PLC from anywhere outside on the internet, smartphones, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, anywhere really that you have internet access. If you have port forwarding enabled by your IT person for the PLC, you will be able to externally access the controller. So that was pretty much the quick overview of what we're going to be covering. So I will exit out of PowerPoint. And we'll start off with VisiLogic. Now, we'll first look at the simple web server, and then we'll take a look at the advanced after. But the first thing we're going to do is I'll open up again a new blank project in VisiLogic. I happen to be using a 570 on my desk, so I'm just going to select a 570. Now, before we configure the web server, the first thing that you need to make sure you have in the ladder section of your program, I'm just in the main routine right now, as is true whenever you're using any type of Ethernet communications with our controllers, you need to make sure you set up the IP address, PLC name, and also any relevant sockets that you want to be using. So we'll start off in our program. I'll grab a direct contact and I'll place that down inside net 1. Now what I'm going to use here is a standard procedure for Unitronics, again covered in our Ethernet webinar. I'll use a system bit 2, which is a one-time power-up bit. So I'll reiterate as well, whenever you're using Ethernet, you need to have the different parameters defined, configuration parameters, off a single one-shot condition. So a system bit 2 power-up bit is going to be high for the single scan only in the program. The first time the controller is power up or it's reset, system bit 2 will be active. So that's why I'm going to use system bit 2 for essentially any of my communications configuration parameters here. In this case, we're going to be using the PLC name and also setting our IP address. So under the COM menu, I'll grab the set PLC name function block. It's always a good idea to have a PLC name defined. This is just an alphanumeric English character name, and you can think of it as an extra layer of security. So I'll call it Webserver, all lowercase. Again, it's just to provide an additional layer of security. Any of our utilities are free utilities that we offer do require that you specify a PLC name if you want to be able to utilize them, so that's why it's just a good practice to get into including a PLC name in your Ethernet or any type of communications relay applications. So I have my PLC name first. Next, under the COM menu and the TCP IP, I will select card in it. So I'm going to initialize my Ethernet card that is already installed inside my controller. So I'll drop that down on the rail. And in the IP parameters here, you want to just make sure you have a valid IP address for your network. These settings here just happen to be what my system uses. So I'll enter these in. Again, this will be specific to your corporate network, and you can talk to someone from IT if you need help determining what a valid IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. These are just standard parameters that you would define for an Ethernet card. So my IP address, my subnet mask, and my gateway defined. Next thing I want to do is I want to make sure I initialize a socket. So I'll place that on the rail. Now you have 4 available sockets to work with. I'm just going to select socket 0 in this instance. Again, you can use either or any of them that you want really. Protocol, I'm going to select HTTP. When you want to use the web server, you need to ensure that you select the protocol as HTTP. And as of the latest VisiLogic, you are also able to define the local port that you want to use. By default, Ethernet, web page, web browsers use local port 80 as the default. It used to be selected so you could only use port 80, but recently we opened it up so you can assign whatever local port you want to use for the web server. But again, most commonly, 99% of the time, you're going to be using local port 80 for HTTP internet web browser communication. So I'll leave it on the default. Socket 0 I chose, protocol HTTP, and my local port 80. Okay, so that's all that I really need to define to get things set up first before I worry about anything else with the web server, my standard Ethernet communications. So we'll look at specifically now configuring the simple web server. So we'll go to the View menu, and then you'll see there's the option for web server configuration. Again, this can be found at a couple of places in the program, but it's always going to be under the View menu and web server communications. Okay, so within this web server configure, you have the ability to specify the operands. You can customize the page names, and we'll get started first. I'll give it a page name, simple web server demo. Okay, so the next option you have is the refresh time. The default is 5 seconds, so if you have operands that are changing constantly, you can either manually click the refresh button, or you can adjust the time if you like as well to how often the web page will automatically send the HTML code to refresh the page. We'll leave it on 5 seconds for this particular example. On the right hand side, you have the ability to specify a marquee text that you'll see when we look at the example. It's just going to be a scrolling bar, so you can have your corporate website be here, whatever you want to advertise really. I'll advertise our webinars here, unitronics.com/webinars, which by the way is where you can find all of the recordings for our previous sessions, and future recordings that we make as well will be at this unitronics.com/webinars address. You can change the color and the text as well. Unitronics PLCs, click me, whatever you want to have really. So the next thing that we'll do though is we will add some operands. So I'm going to click the append line. Now this is where we actually pick the different registers that we want to be able to access or view. So you have the ability to give a description. So we'll call it, say, let's call it our memory integer 0. Now under the operands is where you actually specify the address that you want to be able to link to. So let's just say MI0. So when I gave it the description here, this can be anything. It can also, let's say, we'll have it be the PSI that we're monitoring. It's just more user feedback that you have there. Also the decimal base format. So if you have a value that you know has pre-programmed in a decimal offset, you can have, let's say, 5 whole numbers and 1 decimal inserted on there. So we'll have it at 4.1, let's say. Now also the next is the checkbox for editable. You can make it so that you can change the value on the fly if the checkbox is selected. If it's unselected, it will just give you the readout for the value and not allow you to change it. Alarms and warnings, you can also specify different colors for the value if it's a different range that you specify. So we won't bother using that right now, but I'll click OK. And now we'll see the operand is added on the list. You can also have multiple pages in the web server as well. So if I click Insert Page, let's do a pen page actually. We'll add a different page. You'll see now the page name is page 2. Again, fully customizable. Let's call it Web Server Demo Page 2. Click OK. And once more, I will append a line, and this time I'll call it, we'll look at our memory bit on, off, let's say. So this time I will link it to my MB0. Now what's nice too is you have the option to show binary text. So instead of just saying a 0 and a 1, you can actually have some sort of label. So we'll call it our VAT is off or our VAT is on. Again, whatever you want to have there. Also, if I click the checkbox for editable, you'll be able to change that value as well on the web server. So I'll click OK. So far I've defined my 2 pages. Other things we can do is you can supply a custom logo. By default, the Unitronics logo will be in there, but you can click Custom Logo and have it your own, corporate logo be in there. If you do the custom logo, this will save the image on the memory for the web server. However, you can also link to an external image as well. So if you just want to grab the image off your corporate website and specify the link for that image there, it will just redirect to that image, grab it, and display it on the simple web server. So we'll leave it as our default Unitronics logo. Other things we can do, under the Pages menu, you can calculate the memory allocation. So this will show you how much more space you have to define operands. It's a little bit different. You can see a little bit less memory for the 130, but again, generally it's way more than you'd ever be able to utilize. So a nice option we have too as well is you can preview pages. So if I go to pages and then preview pages, it will open up and give you a kind of an overview of what it's going to look like. My first page, my second page. Right now these values aren't going to be live because it's just an example, but we'll look at actually a live version of it. So let's close out of there. So that's pretty much all you need to do to define the different operands, define the different bits. So I'm just going to click OK right now. And to make it a little bit interesting, I'm going to go to the HMI and I'll insert a variable numeric. We'll link this to MI0. We'll make a keypad entry as well, put it 4 and 1. And make the font a little bit bigger as well. So I'm just going to do this so we can see on the PLC screen and also on the web server to see how they do in fact match as far as the values. So what else do we want to put? We want to put a binary text switch. So we'll just say off and on. Link it to MB0 because that's the other value that we had defined in the web server. So the first variable is my MI0, and then we have MB0 as well. So I'll just indicate that as well with a text box. And I'll do the same thing for MB0, just so we know. Okay, let me go ahead and download this to my controller on my desk. Once again, if there's any questions at any point during this about web servers in general or specifically what I'm doing, Tony is sitting here as well, able to answer any questions that you type in the checkbox. And we'll wait one moment while it downloads. Okay, this is almost done here now. I'll click OK. And if you remember, the IP address I had given specifically for our local intranet here is 10.2.2.77. So let me bring up the PLC screen first. I'll open up my remote access. Now let's put an interesting value in MI0, put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I didn't put enough variables on the screen, so we'll just do 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and our MB0 state is currently off. So MI0 contains 1, 2, 3, 4, and MB is off. This is what the live values in the PLC are. So I will go to my web browser, and let me see if I can have these both at the same time. Yeah. Alright, so I'm going to punch in the IP address for the controller on my local intranet, which is 10. Why am I not entering? 10.2.2.77 is the IP address that I had defined. So I just entered that in, and now on my local intranet you can see this is the live value. This is running off of the PLC on my desk right now. So it opens up to just give you some information when you first get on about the PLC data, the type of controller you're using, OS, boot, bin, so on and so forth. But you'll notice on the left tab, I can click the different pages that I made. So if I click on Web Server Demo, you'll see I have memory integer 0. I had also called it PSI, and the value is 123.4 because we added a decimal place. Now if I go to edit value, let's change that to be 456.7. You should notice once I click OK, the PLC value also changes. The local value in the register, you can notice on the Vision remote access, that changes as well. So I can do the same thing if I go to my Webserver demo page 2. Right now, memory bit 0 is in the off position, which is indicated from my PLC screen in remote access and also on the web server. If I go to edit value, I can change that to be a state 1, hit OK. You'll notice over here MB0 goes to the on, and also after 5 seconds the page refresh that we had specified, the value changes once more on the web server. So that's really just a quick demonstration, a simple demonstration of what you can do with the simple web server. Again, you can make this more fancy. You can have a lot more variables. You can have a lot more integers that are being displayed, system integers, memory bits, memory integers, whatever operand values you really want. You can specify in the different pages. Again, the default logo is Unitronics. You can change that as well. So simple web server, its best unique property is that, once again, it's simple to define, simple to create. You don't have to be familiar with HTML coding, front page, anything like that at all. Anyone really can just open up, click, define their operands, and it's good to go. So that's the extent of what I wanted to demo with a simple web server. So we'll take a look next at the advanced web server. So let me save this project. I'll put it on my desktop. Again, this file, along with the PowerPoint presentation and the recorded video, will be available online, hopefully tomorrow as well. So that project is saved. What I'm going to open up next is, I have saved on my computer the template file for the advanced web server. So you notice once I open this up, it's a blank project essentially, except for, you'll notice the web server with DTs, there's a module. These are all locked, as I mentioned before. They are Unitronics intellectual property. So the advanced web server is not a function built into VisiLogic per se, like the simple web server. If you want to be able to utilize this advanced web server, which again uses the SD card as well, you have to start with this template application because it is not built into a VisiLogic, at least yet, like the simple web server is. So you start with this template application. It's available in a 130 and also a color 350, 560, 570, 1040 variation. So let me show you real quick. You can grab this off of our website, unitronics.com, and then it's the support tab, PLC tools and applications, and the first option you have is complex web server. Download the zip file. It has all of the files that I'm going to be using and showing right now. Specifically, I opened up the one for web server application, the template for a color vision. So again, you start with this file and then you build your project around it is really the right way to go about it, because it does have these locked subroutines and you cannot import them into your existing project. It's not allowed for locked subroutines, so again we recommend you start with this template project. So once you have the template project, you can have whatever other code you want in here. Some unique properties about it. There are data tables. Data tables allow you to see here, you can specify the users. As I mentioned before, you can have password protection. You define those in the data tables. Also the folders. These ones you can see if you're familiar with our SD card. These are the different folder directories that you have available to access. These are the folders that are formatted with the Unitronics SD card tools by default. So this data table is essentially giving you access to be able to download different files off the SD card, which we'll see later. File types, again, these are just the different types of files that are supported for allowing download from the SD card and from the web server specifically. Addresses. If you want to be able to edit values with the advanced web server, you do need to specify those values inside this addresses data table. So in this specific case, ML12 is specified. If you do not specify a memory long or memory integer or memory bit in this data table, you'll be able to still view it from the advanced web server, but you won't be able to actually edit values. So once again, if you want to be able to edit values with the advanced web server, you need to specify those memory integers, memory longs, whatever operands really inside this addresses data table. Otherwise, you will not be able to edit them. You will solely be able to essentially read-only idea. You'll only be able to view them. So I'm going over this information for it, but let me show you as well the PDF file that comes in this zip file package that I had just shown you from our website that you can download for free. The Enhanced Vision Web Server PDF goes over everything I'm going to briefly cover in this webinar. And shows you everything that you need, creating the web pages. It also goes over what I had just mentioned with the data tables as far as specifying the files that you want to be able to edit. Preparing here, it shows you the different lines you can access in the data tables for the addresses. So all the information I'm going over briefly now is fully documented in great detail with great comments. This PDF is really how I learned how to use the advanced web server, so it's well written, goes over everything that you really need to know. So what we'll do first, we'll go back to our web server template file. You'll notice I also specified beforehand just the same IP address, PLC name, and socket once more is HTTP, local port 80. Same standard things you need to define for Ethernet. I'll go ahead to the startup display once more, and I'll put a numeric integer, and I'll link, we'll just look at MI0 again this time. So my MI0, we'll put a place of 4 and 1. Okay, so just so we can see again, I do want to make that keypad entry as well. Okay. So this is really all you need to do as far as the logic is concerned with the advanced web server. You use this template file, specify a correct IP address, PLC name, and socket HTTP, and that's all you need to define within the actual VisiLogic application, as well as any of the addresses I mentioned as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this to my controller, and then we'll talk about actually creating a web page to utilize. So let me make sure this download gets going first. Alright, so for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use Microsoft Front Page. Again, you can use any type of HTML editor that you choose, anyone you have. Front Page is just easy to demo with. So first thing I'm going to do is going to type in some text here. I just have a blank page open, a blank HTML page. Welcome to the web server demo advanced. And you can format the text however you choose. We'll make that be the header. Let me go back to VisiLogic and hit OK here so that gets going. Alright, so my template is now downloaded to the controller. Let's go back over to Front Page. Alright, so I'm just going to create a basic blank page in Front Page to demo this. So I just have some text saying welcome to the web server demo. Again, in Front Page or any other type of HTML editor, this is where you can link any YouTube videos or any custom images, anything that you like really. Again, this is fully customizable. It's going to look pretty simple here just for our demo purposes, but you can fully customize this page. So I'm going to just have some simple text that says welcome to the web server demo. Now another key point that I want to go over is how to actually link operands inside the HTML code. So it's a little bit different with the advanced web server. I'll open up the document for reference. You can see it explains when you want to be able to link operand values from the HTML code, you need to follow this format that it goes over in the PDF. So what you need to do is you need to have a bracket and then the operand type, in this case MI. The X's denote the operand address. So if we were looking for MI0, say we'd have bracket, MI, and then 0. Then you need to have a comma and then a digit which represents the decimal place point. So if you have a 0, there'll be no decimal place. If you have a 1, 1 is in the first 10 place, so on and so forth. It's essentially where you want to have a dummy decimal place inserted. Also the format. So if the value is going to be decimal unsigned, if you have a signed value, if you want to display it in hexadecimal, this is where you would specify the number, the format. The codes that you would use are available in the chart right here. And then also leading spaces. So the last comma separated digit that you insert is whether or not you want to have one leading spaces, zeros, or none. So you just need to have a bracket, the operand type, operand address, your decimal point placement, your format, and your leading spaces. This is how the controller is going to interpret operands that you want to be able to read, so you need to make sure you follow this format, whether or not you're using registers or Boolean values, also string library. It goes over timers, all the different formats and options are again once available in this PDF. So I'll go back to my front page and I want to display, in this case, MI0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a bracket, my bracket, my MI, I'm going to look at MI0, put a comma, I'll have one decimal place inserted, 0 for the format, we're going to have just a unsigned number, and a 0 once more for the last option. Close my bracket. So this string or tag, whatever you want to call it really, is going to be interpreted by the PLC and display after it's been shown on the HTML page as the actual numeric value that's contained in MI0. So this is essentially the code, the HTML code that you need to insert in your page for it to correlate to an actual numeric value from an operand. So I'll also make this, let's just have it be in red. So that's really all that you need to have just for a simple demo to show what we can do with the advanced web server. So I'm going to save this. I'll save it in my webinars folder. So another key thing I need to point out, which is again is covered in the PDF, you need to make sure you assign the name of start.htm as the first page that your website is going to be directed to. When the PLC recognizes a hit on that IP address, it's going to target this specific HTML file name. So it's going to be looking for start.htm. So you can't have it be called like index is the default that you may have on a lot of different other pages as essentially the home page. Your home page needs to be labeled as start.htm in this format. Otherwise, the PLC will not know where to go. This is the name for the page that it will look for by default, which cannot be changed really. I mean, you can do other HTML code redirects if you really want to, but this is going to be the home page, the page that it goes to by default, the one that is called start.htm. So I'm going to save that. Alright, so I created my page. Next thing I need to do, well, what I need to do is place that page on the SD card. But before I do that, I'm going to show you, we have the SD card tools, and we also have within the SD card suite, the SD card tools, we have a HTML compiler, the second tab available in the tools. So what does this HTML compiler do? What it does is it will format the code that you have written, the HTML pages. It will make sure that they are in the proper format to go on to the SD card. Summarizing, that's the basic concept of what it's doing. Specifically, our PLC, it accesses the SD card in 512-byte chunks. So that's just how our operating system on the PLC handles anything with the SD card, whether it's using data tables or writing trends to the SD card. Any SD card operations are transferred in 512-byte chunks. So specifically what this HTML compiler does, it ensures that any of the code that you have written does not go over or is not caught in between, I guess, the 512-byte limitation. So if you have some code, make sure it's not caught in the middle. It will separate the code so that it's in its own 512-byte chunk. So if you have a large web page, it will make sure that everything is separated out so that nothing gets lost or no code gets lost within the 512-byte designation. So really what you just need to know is run your HTML page through the compiler, and it will make sure that all the syntax is formatted correctly and that nothing is lost when it's actually transferred between the PLC and the SD card. So really just run your pages through this HTML compiler after you've written them, and everything will be good to go. So I'm going to select my source file. I had placed it in my desktop, and I called it start, and my destination file, I'll just put it on the desktop. Call it start again once more. I want to replace it, and I click compile, and it goes ahead and compiles the file. Make sure nothing is caught in between those 512-byte chunk breaks, and it just compiles that, and the file is good to go. So I'll close out, and what I'm going to do is go to my desktop, and I will copy that HTML page if I can find it. Copy. And right now I have a SD card inserted into my computer. Again, you can use, if you choose, say, SD card Explorer, but I have the card in my computer right now, so I'll navigate to that drive. This card has already been formatted with the SD card tools to have the Unitronics file folder structure on it. I'm going to go into the web folder. The web folder is where you need to place your HTML pages. That's where it's going to be looking for them to be accessed. So I'm just going to paste my start.html file inside the web folder of the formatted SD card. Let me go up, and now I'm going to eject the SD card out of my computer, and I'm going to pop it inside my V570 PLC. Alright, so let's look at the demo like we had before. I'll go in online test mode, bring up the PLC screen so you can actually see what's on my desk. So remember, I downloaded this advanced web server application a few minutes ago, so it's showing the status. This is MI0. I didn't label it this time, but it's MI0. And now we'll go back into Firefox. Alright, so I'll open up a new tab, and once again, this gave the same IP address. So it was 10.2.2.77, and you can see my web page now is being hosted off of the SD card. That start HTML page I just made was on there. So I'll change the value just so you can see. I'll make it 123.4. So 123.4 is on the PLC screen. Now I'm going to have to refresh this because I don't remember if I put in a code for refresh. But if I hit refresh manually, the value will change, 123.4. Again, in the HTML code, you can program in a refresh to be every 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds if you want those values to automatically update on their own. But that's a simple example of using the advanced web server. So what we did was we used this template project, downloaded it to our PLC. We went into front page, we just created a basic page, used the the specified HTML code for referencing an operand, MI0 in this case. Again, that information is found in more detail in the PDF. So I saved that, I ran it through my Unitronics SD card suite HTML compiler, and then I just copied that HTML page, placed it inside the web folder on the SD card, placed that SD card inside my PLC, and you'll notice I'm able to view that page from Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever value. This right now is limited again only to my local intranet. Right now there's no port forwarding enabled on this specific 10.2.2.77 IP address. So right now if you tried to punch that into your browser, it would not work. You can only view this web page if you are plugged into a Unitronics network currently, or our corporate network specifically. However, as I mentioned before, if you want your web server, either advanced or simple, to be able to be accessed from anywhere in the world, your smartphones, any web browser, anywhere really, you need to talk to your IT department and have them enable what is called port forwarding, so that they will be able to target the outside IP address. The network cloud will go ahead and route that, port forward it to the local IP address that you specify in the ladder logic, and then you'll be able to view that web server that you would normally be able to view only from your local intranet. You'll be able to view it from the World Wide Web, the external internet. So again, if you want to be able to view it anywhere, port forwarding is what you need to talk to your IT people about. Now we do also have another example of the advanced web server, which is running in our office here, which I also created. This one is a little bit more fancy. It took a little bit longer to put together. I will show you that. I have it bookmarked, so I'll go to my advanced web server demo. And on this page you can see it's a little bit more fancy. We have moving graphics. I linked to an external app. I have the Yahoo weather, so it shows the temperature at 69 degrees outside in Quincy, Massachusetts right now, right outside my window. We have a picture of our office as well. And then also on this PLC what we have is it's just a thermocouple input, so it's a temperature sensor. We're reading the temperature inside our server room. We're also logging to see when the highest temperature of the day occurred. I just have some extra logic which is going over this. So again, this is just the advanced web server template that's running on a PLC in our office, and I just made these web pages to show a little bit about what we can do. Click on temperature log. You'll notice I just made a chart where it's saving the values for that page. You can also click the link to download an Excel file. So I will also be able to open up and see a log. I created a log of the information that's on the PLC. You can download this file as being saved to the SD card when it's writing the log, and it's also makes it so you can be able to download that file off the SD card and have it available on any PLC. So I have the log file able to download as well. There's a section that's called Operand Access. From here you can view the contents of the string library. You can view the contents of, say, double words. I made it so you can edit a value. Right now MI11 happens to have 4. I can change the value and hit right, and the live value inside MI11 changes to 1337. Again, for this specific example, I had linked MI11 inside the data table. So if you want to have values be editable, not solely read-only, you do need to also add that into the data table of the VisiLogic application. But again, that's gone over in the PDF. And we also have a button which pulses the system bit, which is for a beep. So whenever you click that button, it'll make a loud beeping noise in our office. And I do have it on a timer limitation as well now, so you can't click it more than once every 1 minute. And a lot of people were abusing the fact that they could click beep multiple times and have it beep really loud in our office. So I also put a limitation on there, so it doesn't beep more than once every minute. But again, it's just an example of how you can pulse bits, how you can write integer values, show string library. And the last tab is just getting started. Getting started again, this is just what was in the PowerPoint earlier, showing you what you need for that. So if you want to give this address out to customers, you can do that. We have it available so anyone can log in. If you type in this address that I'm sending